Okay, so we have been working on these many years because let's be honest, it's complicated. We have seen from James, whenever we got multiple pieces together, you need to juggle them. It's not easy stuff. And of course, you need to make it right. So let's rewind exactly where we started. And actually, I'm really, let's say, emotional about it because that was my first change in Gerrit, the plugin loader. And that was back in 2012. So I didn't have white hair. Possibly, maybe somebody Google still have the recording or the presentation that they did there. But that was interesting because we were all feeling the pain of forking Gerrit, and some of us still feel the pain of forking Gerrit. And I would say, you know how complex it is managing a fork, right? With the plugin, I can show you that you can extend Gerrit in 10 minutes. And it was cool because I was able actually to start from scratch coding it and showing that in 10 minutes, I introduced a new feature without changing Gerrit code base and was working. And that was cool. And then, of course, 2 years later, I say, I can do better than that. Why 10 minutes? Maybe we can do it maybe in 2 minutes or 1 minute. And I believe in this one, it was fine because the previous one, actually, I was cheating a little bit because I had the code already and I was just doing the build. But in this case, I say, I'm not cheating this time. And I typed all the code myself, right? And I was able to complete, I believe, in 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, I made a script in Groovy, and I was able to introduce a new functionality in Gerrit. And I believe, no, maybe it was 2014, because then I broke a change that David wanted to do. And because of my scripting plugin, his change was abandoned. So I'm really sorry about that. And 2 years later, in 2016, I said, plugins are not enough because we started thinking about maybe doing multi-sites. We were thinking about doing maybe some wrapping around Gerrit functionality that needed to change more fundamental pieces of Gerrit. The caches, the secure config, that before lib modules, they were never encrypted. Who on earth is going to put passwords in clear text on the file system, right? Secondary index, many things with it, yeah? That was 2016. That was not my first change anymore. I believe I did many changes. Sean was really, let's say, tired, review all my changes. This one, we just did in a hackathon, done. Lib modules introduced. And many things nowadays are done through lib modules. So David Ostrowski mentioned the Elasticsearch, and it was really handy because Elasticsearch was open source, and there was no issues in having Elasticsearch in Gerrit. And then became, let's say, not so open source, right? And we needed to remove it from Gerrit. So because the modules allowed us to do that, in all these 11 years of messing up with the plugins and modules, we achieved quite a lot. 164 maintained and running plugins and extensions, which is absolutely amazing, right? And we feel the pain whenever we do a new version of Gerrit because we need, of course, to make sure they will still work. But it is something. And we got 9 different lib modules. Lib modules are very complicated, but we got 9 that allow to extend some core functionality of Gerrit. So there was Jacek talking about the cache RefDB. Basically, he was able to replace the RefDB inside Gerrit, inside JGit, as a lib module without forking Gerrit, okay? And also, because we like the modules and we like the plugins a lot, we said, these pieces of Gerrit, why should I stay in Gerrit core? So we started with replication. You won't believe it, but replication was not a plugin. Replication was in core Gerrit, or review nodes, so hooks, Elasticsearch. And most likely, the next one that is going to be candidate could be prolog rules. Why not, right? Because, of course, we want to abandon prolog, but I'm sure that in version 7.0 of Gerrit, Starwell will still be using prolog rules. And if that becomes an extension or a module, why not? Yeah, as long as we as maintainers don't have to manage, you guys manage it. Okay, so, but as we were writing plugins, of course, we don't like, let's say, to copy and paste code. We started, of course, managing the concept of reusing the same code. So in terms of Jira integration, I started many years ago doing the Jira integration. Some guys from Facebook say, that is really great. Why don't we do Fabricator? I say, fine, I will just abstract Jira. We'll do a generic one, you do Fabricator. And then some other guys from Ericsson said, we got RTC, can we do rational team consult? You can do a rational team consult and many more. Now we are planning to do ITS GitHub, right? Because if you got issues on GitHub, why not? We can integrate those ones as well. And then, of course, when we were doing pull replication and there was Marcin and Chris talking about pull replication, we didn't reinvent the wheel. It's just an extension of the replication plugin. So replication and pull replication, they share the same configuration because it is actually the same plugin. They're just an additional methodology of doing replication. And then, of course, things are getting more complicated because then if you want to do multi-site, you need pull replication, you need replication, you need event broker, you need this one, and you need to interact with the other plugins. And very soon, it was not very soon, it took a few years, but we ended up with a little bit of a mess, right? Because this is the messy thing that we need to do today. And I agree that it's messy, and I have to confess that I'm guilty. So who has to be blamed for this one? I'm guilty, right? Because when we needed to do this, instead of pushing further into the cross-plugin communication, then I say, okay, but we can kind of hijack lib modules. And we definitely hijacked the mechanism. Lib modules that were not designed to be used in this way. Lib modules that were designed to replace pieces of Gerrit. But we hijacked the lib modules because we needed a plugin that depends on another plugin, but we didn't have the functionality. So what we did was to say, hold on, lib modules are a fundamental part of Gerrit. So if I do a lib module that actually is pretending to be a lib module, but just gives some classes, those classes are loaded before the plugin. So I can use them in the plugin. And then the very nasty thing that we do today, so believe me, when you see the documentation, say, why should be so hard to install multi-site? Because we are kind of, let's say, victim of ourselves. So you need to put a plugin that is replication with a symbolic link into lib for the only reason to make the replication jar injector visible by the pull replication plugin. And the same thing with event broker. So this is bad. Okay, we agree this is bad, and we need to fix this. Okay, so there were many proposals during the years, but I will not go through all of them. As I say always to my kids, it's fine to have fun, to play. It's time to tidy up. Okay, so the way to tidy up, you got two ways. The first one is to take all the toys that your kids they put in the room, take rubbish bin, put everything to the rubbish bin, and go and buy new toys. Do you like this way? I don't like it because, first of all, we are just creating more rubbish at the end of the day. And nobody tells you that the new toys will not end up in new rubbish, right? My approach is different, but I say we need to reduce waste. So reduce the new things we're doing completely new. And we should see and look at what we've done and just do it in a tidy way. So there was nothing wrong in doing a little bit of mess. We just did it in a messy way. So why can't we take exactly the same concept that is working because it's been live, not just in GitHub, but many people are using it live. Tomorrow there's going to be an example how multi-site has been live and it's working fine, but just made it in a very ordered way. So the first thing is plugins should go to plugins, shouldn't go to lib. If it's a lib, go to lib. If it's a plugin, goes to plugin. And the only thing we wanted to do is to make sure that a specific plugin is dependent from another through an interface. So what I did is basically to just introduce the concept of an API module, a juice module where a plugin says, that's the API I want to expose to others. That's it. That's my API. That's my contract. So please, plugin loader, do the right thing. So the plugin shouldn't go into the mess of how to do these things. Should just declare, that's my interface. That's it. And in terms of you as a plugin developer, doesn't change much. The only thing you need to do is to put your interfaces, not your implementation, interfaces into the API module. What the plugin loader will do, so we'll go back to this slide, is gonna basically load all the plugins. They have a declaration of being an API module. They will be all loaded first. And then whenever there is another plugin that uses this one, they will just say, okay, my injector depends on that one. So we'll basically create a sub-injector of the previous injector. So you can, first of all, it is a derivate class loader, so you can see the same classes. So we don't have to do any magic. And also, if you have any injections induced done by your interface, it will be seen also by the other plugins they are using it. So I believe that when I proposed this one, it was roughly 2 years ago. So the community had 2 years to think about it. And I believe we demonstrated that we can cover many use cases. And also, Tony in the next talk is going to show how this functionality could help introduce something very useful. That is the concept of pluggable checks. So just to give you the example that Tony is going to show, that is going to be the demo. So is if you have a health check, it will give you the healthiness of Gerrit. But the healthiness of Gerrit may depend not just on the state of Gerrit, but also the state of other plugins. And it doesn't make any sense that every single plugin exposes is health check, because the load balancer is one endpoint, right? It's called one endpoint by saying, am I healthy or not? So the health check, of course, on the other side doesn't make sense. They will have the knowledge of every possible 164 plugins that exist in Gerrit. Otherwise, the health check code will become a complete disaster. So what Tony is going to show in the next talk is how, leveraging this mechanism, the health check could say, whoever plugin wants to give me an extra check, feel free to do it. It's going to show that you load the health check and then you got the basic functionality. But as soon as you put some other plugins on top, they can add dynamically extra checks. And as soon as you remove the plugin, the extra checks that go away.
So today I'm going to talk about how to tailor Gerrit's health check with the extensible checks. So Luca gave you a little taster, a little amuse-bouche of what this is going to be about. But first of all, I would like to take everybody on the same page about what the health check plugin is. Luca and I already gave a talk last year in the Gerrit User Summit 2022 in London. The name is How Health Check and Multisite Keeps You Sleep at Night. And basically it was talking about the health check and the interaction with multisite. So if you want to know the details about the health check and how it interacts with multisite, that's the talk you should go and refer to. But I'm just going to give a little recap here so that everybody can follow along. Hopefully not too painful. So how do you check if your Gerrit instance is healthy? So obviously you might have some scripting that some supervisor, you can check the Gerrit process is up and running. You know, this is very naive, but also it's very important. Gerrit process is not up and running, then there is very little you can do. You can check for Gerrit reachability. Does it work over HTTP? Does it work over SSH? So you can try to open some connections to Gerrit, maybe some at TCP level or HTTP level, and make sure that Gerrit is actually reachable and responsive. You can check the UI, obviously. This is probably something that your users are doing as well. Like if the UI is not responsive, is not rendering, probably you will be alerted very soon. There is no alert system like the final users, right? So you can do all of these things, and in fact, you probably are doing all of these things. But obviously, this might not be enough. So you can actually have a Gerrit that is up and running. You can have a Gerrit that is reachable. The UI can be rendering, and yet your Gerrit instance shouldn't really be considered healthy. And the best way to find out whether the Gerrit instance is healthy or not is, well, to ask Gerrit itself. And this is exactly what the health check plugin does. So it's a component-based plugin which provides lots of good goodies out of the box. You can make sure that you can list projects alongside their description. You can make sure that you can open repositories and read them, and so that the repositories are not actually corrupted. You can even configure which repositories you care about, which ones are the most important for your organization, and then you can have the health check having some Git level activities on those. So you actually make sure that the Git layer is functional. You can test the authentication layer, so you can you provide a user and a password, for example. You can try to authenticate with your authentication backend, whatever that authentication backend is. So you can make sure that the authentication from Gerrit point of view is working fine and actually simulating what the user experience would be when they try to authenticate. You can check the number of block threads, for example. Yes, your Gerrit can be up and running, can be reachable over every channel, but if the threads that Gerrit has available are all blocked, there is very little Gerrit can do to actually serve your request. So if the number of block threads reaches a certain threshold that you can configure and define, obviously you shouldn't really consider that Gerrit instance as healthy, because it effectively is not able to serve any traffic. And the same is true if you have deadlocks. So if you can find that the JVM is building up deadlocks, then maybe you have an application problem. Also, you're consuming logs from your thread pools, which might eventually lead to the starvation of threads for Gerrit. So keeping an eye on the number of deadlocks is also something really important. Again, your Gerrit instance up and running, but not very functional, not very healthy. You can also check the Lucene index and make sure that you can actually query for changes. This is an activity that happens all the time. It's executed over REST API calls, over UI searches. So your ability to query changes in Gerrit, you can define which query you want to run and what's the timeout, what's the maximum time that you expect Gerrit to be able to execute that query. If this component fails, maybe you have a problem at index level, where maybe your I/O are slowing down, maybe your disk is misbehaving, and so on. So this is something that comes out of the box when you install the health check. And if you're not using the health check plugin, you should really consider doing so, because it's literally very easy to install. You just drop a jar in the plugins directory, and it's very easy to configure, so you can enable and disable all these components as it is fit for your company. So the overall result of these components together is exposed over an HTTP endpoint, which you can query through the GET. And the HTTP endpoint basically will report the overall health status of your Gerrit instance, considering the cumulative results that all these components bring together. So if every component is successful, then the HTTP endpoint will return a success result. So it will give you back a 200 OK. And by querying this endpoint, you will know that every one of your check finished successfully in a timely manner. If one of those components start failing, for example, imagine you're not able to communicate with your LDAP backend, for example, because of some networking issues, or because your backend LDAP is unreachable, then obviously the HTTP endpoint will no longer return an OK value, but it will return a failure. So how can you leverage this information? What can you do with it? So now you have a single information point that can tell you what's the overall health status of your Gerrit instance. Well, a typical case is to instruct a load balancer to leverage that information. Most load balancers out there, for example, HA proxies, support health check directives. So you can configure HA proxy, for example, to continuously pull the health check HTTP endpoint every X number of seconds, and to consider healthy only the instances that are being reported to be healthy through the health check endpoint. So imagine you have a bunch of replicas behind the load balancer. Load balancer is being configured to pull the health check endpoint, and all of them are happily returning to 100 OK, because all of them can perform the component checks successfully in a timely manner. If one of these components fail, like in the example I gave before, then the cool thing about this is that the load balancer can take the decision of removing this node automatically from the pool of nodes. Therefore, requests that are reaching the load balancer will no longer be served through the faulty node, which you can then go out and inspect to find out what the problem actually was. So you can then fix it, and then after you fix the problem, you can just bring the obviously the health check will start being successful again, and the node will be brought back into the pool and will continue serving traffic. So this is a recap of what the health check plugin does in a nutshell. There are many hubs and many configurations that you can have, but this is kind of like the intended behavior and how you can use it. And it's cool, it's great. But so the question is this enough? Now, what if the healthiness of your Gerrit depends also on a plugin? Like we don't run Gerrit in isolation. Usually Gerrit is part of like a cluster of other instances, or is part of a wider topology of services and infrastructure in your organization. And then maybe you need to talk to those. And if you have plugins that allow integrating Gerrit in this context, depending on your business logic, you might want to consider some of the plugins that you write, that you have in-house. You want them to be part of the healthiness check when the health check endpoint is executed. So imagine, for example, this scenario. Imagine the case I just explained it before, in which you have your some Gerrit nodes behind the load balancer. But imagine that the Git data is actually coming from a Gerrit primary, which you can see here on the left side. And imagine the Git data is replicated in some way, maybe through push replication or pull replication. It doesn't really matter. What it matters is that the Git data travels from the primary to the replicas, and the replicas keep running exactly the health check endpoint as we discussed before. So they check the authentication layer and the ability to query, change indexes, and so on. And at some point, imagine the replication stops working for one of these instances. So maybe a networking issues or misconfiguration or whatever. But the point is that this Gerrit instance, what's going to happen is going to start falling behind comparatively to the other to the latest state of your Gerrit installation. So if there is a request that comes through the load balancer for a change that was not replicated to the second node because of the faulty replication, you wouldn't want to serve that request through that node, and therefore that node shouldn't really be part of the pool that the load balancer is using to serve requests to the users. So nevertheless, the health checks is still successful here, right? Because there is nothing as per the definition of health check that we discussed earlier that can tell the load balancer that this node is not healthy. Every test is passing, Gerrit is up and running, you can query Lucene, you can query the authentication, your authentication backend, JGit is fine, there is no corruption of data, yet this node shouldn't really be part of the pool because its state in the entire context of this installation is changed. And you know that this node is actually running behind and therefore shouldn't be serving any traffic. So how do we fix this? How do we let the healthcheck plugin being aware that this the replication is falling behind, for example, or that you have some other custom plugins in your organization that actually stop working as they should? Well, spoiler alert, thanks to the cross plugin dependencies that Luca mentioned above, this is possible. And this is possible because we can get these plugins, the replication plugin or the pull replication plugin, multi-site, or whatever plugins you have, you use in your company to register health check components to the health check plugin. But in order to do this, we need to unlock the possibility for those plugins to talk to each other and actually to load the interfaces that the health check plugin presents. So what I'm gonna discuss about and what I'm gonna show you is not yet been merged into master. It's a work in progress that we are finalizing now. We are dependent on the change that Luca mentioned before, which still hasn't made it all the way at the moment. So we kind of have a couple of dependencies that we need to go through before this could be released. But we believe it's going to be done in the next few weeks, a month. So this is just to tell you the direction that we're taking and what will be possible in the future, possibly from Gerrit 3.9 or so. So in order for this to work, two things need to happen. So one thing needs to happen on the health check plugin side, and this is, as Luca mentioned before, only touches the manifest of the health check plugin installation. So all we need to do is to declare a new API module, which will expose the interfaces that plugins need to implement a check for if they want to register a new component. And we've already done that, so this isn't something you don't need to do, but this is just to show you that in order for this to be possible, the health check plugin is exposing this interface through its manifest, and this will allow then the Gerrit class loader to make sure that this class is provided in scope when the plugin that want to register the health check module are loading. So on the plugin side, you pretty much need to do this. You need to add an explicit dependency on the health check plugin. This is because you need to have the health check classes in scope to be able to develop your implementations. So you just add a dependency to your Maven build or your Bazel build file so that the health check is available. And then once you have the dependency, all you have to do is pretty much extend this abstract health check and implement this do check method. The do check method is pretty much the only thing you really need to focus on, and is where your logic is going to go. So this is where you can add everything you need to in order to ensure that the health check component is successful. So you will run your logic and you basically can return two statuses, result passed or result failed. There are other two statuses that are available, but these are managed directly by the health check plugin, which are respectively the disabled one. If you configure a check not to execute, that will be the result that will return, and the timeout. If the health check will wait only for a configured amount of time for your check to execute, and if that doesn't terminate before the timeout, it will return a result .timeout error. But here in this function, you just focused on the failed and passed results. So fingers crossed. I hope things are clear so far. I'm gonna show you some demo live. So probably they will go wrong, but we live only once. So stay with me. Okay, so here I hope you guys can see this. Okay, so I have a version of Gerrit installed where oh, sorry, I need to start it. So I'm just starting a new Gerrit here. Hopefully it will work. And then this instance already has the health check plugin installed. So what we're going to do is we're going to query the endpoint, as I showed. Let me move this out of the way. Okay, so we're gonna make a curl request to the health check status endpoint, and we're gonna see the result. So this is the result that you usually see out of the box, where we see all the components that we discussed about: block threads, authentication, query changes, and so on. If I'm going to list the list of plugins now, which you can do through through this command on the right port. Okay, you can see that we don't actually have the pull replication plugin enabled. So I'm gonna install the pull replication plugin now, and the pull replication has implemented, at the moment, is a dummy health check module that will nevertheless show you how plugins they can automatically add to the list of.
We still can't see the demo.
Okay. Let me see. So we have a Gerrit installation here with the health check plugin. I can query the health check endpoint as you normally do. You get a result, and the result contains all the components that we discussed about, with some information about how long it took to execute. And you obviously have an HTTP status, which I'm going to show now, which shows that the result is successful. So every component is passing. Okay, and I just wanted to show you that if I run the list of plugins, I have a bunch of plugins installed. Pull replication is not one of them. And I made pull replication plugin able to register a custom component to the health check. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to enable the, so as you can see, I have a pull replication jar disabled here. I'm going to enable it. This is going to then, so the plugin loader will notice that there's a new plugin here, and it will then load the pull replication plugin. I think it takes a little bit before it does that. Hopefully not too long. You actually go loaded now. You can see the pull replication is now part of the list of plugins. And so let's query again the health check status. And as you can see, we have an additional component that is now being returned and is seamlessly integrating with the components that the health check plugin provided out of the box. As soon as you disable the pull replication, obviously that component will be automatically removed without creating any other problems to the health check. So it will just deregister its own component. So if I deregister pull application and I run the command again, you will see that the pull application is not there. Also, you get metrics out of the box for this. We spoke about this during the talk in 2022 with Luca. For every time you gather information about the health check, we also exposing that information over as a metric. So it can be scraped and collected through Prometheus and displayed in Grafana. So you can actually have a graph of the health status of your instances, and this will automatically apply to the instances that you register to your component as well. I have another quick demo that I wanted to run. I have a multi-site. I just wanted to show you a little more useful example, if I can. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm just, I have a multi-site installation here. So on the left side here, I have a Gerrit Review 1, and on the right side here, I have a Gerrit Review 2. So again, Gerrit Review 1 is running on port 18080, and Gerrit Review 2 is running on port 18081. So on the left side, I'm querying the health check endpoint for review 1, and on the right side, I'm querying the health check endpoint for review 2. And you will immediately notice that there is an additional component here, which is the multi-site component. Similarly to what I just showed you for the pull application, this is a health check component that we are working on to register a custom component to the health check plugin. And what this component is going to do is going to cover the case I was telling you earlier, in which we want to detect if a Gerrit node is actually running behind the last source of truth, basically. So, and so what the reason I'm going to show you this is because I have these two sites are actually here. So you can see Gerrit 1 and Gerrit 2 here, and they are completely in sync to one to the other. So what I want to do is now make a change to the first node, to review 1, and I explicitly broken my configuration, my replication config, so the correct configuration for replication should be this API URL, which correctly replicates to site to the other node 18081, and I explicitly broke this by adding a port that doesn't exist. So that means that the replication between these two nodes fail. If I create a change to Gerrit Review 1, the Gerrit Review 2 will fall behind. And the reason it will know that it's falling behind is because it will check what the latest value of a specific ref in the global ref DB. So I think Luca mentioned this before. I have a repository here called Hackathon 2023, and if I show the refs here, you can see that we have a refs multi-site version. This is a special ref the multi-site keeps in order to assess how far behind a node is. So the object pointed to by this ref is actually a blob. It's not a commit. And if you inspect this, you will see that is actually not just a blob, but specifically is a timestamp. So by measuring and comparing two timestamps from one node to the other, we can kind of have a good estimate on how much the other node is falling behind. And the multi-site health check basically checks that the lag between the two nodes is not more than a configurable amount of time. So now when I'm going to, I made that amount of time very, very short. And what's going to happen now is that I'm going to try to replicate a change. This will fail, and it should immediately make the multi-site check here fail as well. So we're going to try that. I'm going to node 1. I will create this change from the UI. I'm going to create a new change, master branch, and I say this should not replicate, hopefully. Right, so you can see how here the multi-site detected now that it is actually falling behind because the replication was explicitly broken, and therefore the health check now started failing. So what would happen in a normal situation, obviously, is that you wouldn't want to fail, so you don't want to be so sensitive about this, so you will have like a proper configuration of this. But this is just showing you that like the direction we're going to. And now, so if I explicitly now fix this this by fetching, so now I'm basically fetching everything that we were missing from the instance 1. It should make this component happy again. There you go. And you can see how we fetched the change that we didn't have before, and now the component is passed again. So if it was behind a load balancer, it would now be automatically be taken back into the pool. Okay, so what's next? Well, finalize the cross-plugin dependency that is so deeply in Luca to-do list. I think there has been a great amount of code review comments there, so I'm sure it's just a matter of time now. I would like to finalize the multi-site extension that I just showed you, so that it is fully configurable and it behaves as expected in all scenarios. And then little by little, once we have this, we actually can start tackling all other plugins, right? So we just need to decide if it makes sense for some plugins to participate in the healthiness evaluation of Gerrit, and then just basically writing an implementation for their health check components, and you will be able to start doing this in your for your custom plugins as well, and hopefully it will be useful for some of you.
What happens if you want to change the sensibility of one of those health checks in the plugin? Do you need to, let's suppose you are at the multi-sites like in your demo, what happens? Do I need to restart the whole site?
So that's a good question. So the health check comes with a health check config in which you have per component configuration, and the same health check config will be used to drive the configuration for your plugins as well. At the moment, it does not support full reload of the configuration. Some of the plugins do, like the replication plugin allows auto reloading, and is actually watching for the replication config to change, and it reloads. So it's something we do in other places in Gerrit. So I don't see why we wouldn't be able to do this here. One option would be to reload the plugin. This would cause the reloading of the configuration. But obviously, you don't want to do this too naively, because if you have your health check behind the load balancer, it's going to start getting 404s as soon as you do this, because it will remove the HTTP endpoint altogether. So long story short is no, we cannot, we don't support that, but it will it's something that we can definitely do. Yeah.